Welcome to the EcoPod. Today, we're going deep,
Mhm.
into creating a water-wise garden
Oh, very cool.
using tips and techniques read from the Eco blog.
Okay.
We're going to unearth some real gems, I think, to help you cultivate a thriving garden
Yeah.
that's in harmony with nature.
Awesome. So I think what's exciting about this deep dive is that it goes beyond just saving water.
Yeah.
The Eco blog provides like a blueprint for a mindful gardening philosophy
Yeah?
that helps us work with nature's rhythms.
All right, so let's dig in.
Let's do it.
The Eco blog covers so much ground,
Yeah.
from understanding our soil to maximizing things like rainwater harvesting.
Right.
But it seems like the foundation really lies in getting to know our plants on a deeper level.
Absolutely. Moving away from just a generic watering schedule,
Right.
it's so crucial. The EcoBlog highlights how vital it is to match your watering techniques
Yeah.
to the specific needs of each plant.
So what if my garden has a mix of, let's say, moisture-loving ferns and sun-worshipping succulents?
Ooh, that's a great example of where hydrozoning comes in.
Okay.
It's a technique the EcoBlog dives into,
Yeah.
and it essentially means grouping plants with similar thirst levels together.
Okay.
This allows you to create like targeted watering zones
Uh-huh.
and avoid, overwatering or underwatering.
So that's what hydrozoning is.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I also noticed the Eco blog talks a lot about mulch.
Yes.
It seems like more than just aesthetic appeal.
Mulch is like a secret weapon for water conservation.
Oh, wow.
The EcoBlog emphasizes its ability to act like a protective barrier for your soil.
Okay.
Not only helps lock in moisture,
Yeah.
but also moderates temperature swings
Oh, wow.
and even helps keep those pesky weeds in check.
Okay, so it's multifaceted.
It is.
I'm curious, though, are all mulches created equal in terms of water conservation?
That's where the EcoBlog gets really specific, which
Yeah.
I love.
Yeah.
Organic mulches like shredded leaves or bark chips
Right.
are top choices because they not only conserve water, but they decompose over time,
Yeah.
enriching your soil with valuable nutrients.
Oh, wow.
It's a win-win.
Love that. The Eco blog even encourages readers to check out local grants or programs that support water-wise landscaping.
Oh, no, right.
Who knew you could get financial help to be eco-friendly?
It's a fantastic tip. It really highlights how communities are recognizing the importance of water conservation.
Yeah.
And speaking of innovative approaches,
Okay.
the EcoBlog delves into xeriscaping,
Okay.
which sounds incredibly intriguing.
It does. Xeriscaping sounds like it could be a game changer, but is it just about rocks and cacti?
Actually, it's far more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Xeriscaping is all about designing a landscape that thrives in drier conditions.
Right.
The EcoBlog highlights how it involves carefully selecting drought-tolerant plants and employing smart irrigation techniques to create a visually stunning garden.
So you're saying it's about working with nature, not fighting against it.
Exactly. Now, while we're on the topic of working with nature,
Yeah.
let's talk about the often unsung hero of gardening soil.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
The Eco blog stresses that good soil is the backbone of any successful water-wise garden.
Think of your soil as a reservoir.
Okay.
The EcoBlog breaks down how a well-structured soil, rich in organic matter,
Right.
can hold onto moisture far more effectively.
So how do we boost our soil's ability to act like a sponge?
Compost is like magic for your soil.
Okay.
The EcoBlog really dives into this. It's a powerhouse of organic matter
Wow.
that enhances soil structure
Okay.
and helps it retain water like a champ.
So we're talking about the kind of compost we can make from kitchen scraps and yard waste.
Exactly. It's a fantastic way to close the loop
Yeah.
and create a nutrient-rich environment for your plants.
Yeah.
The EcoBlog even touches on other amendments,
Yeah.
like aged manure, coir, and peat moss that can help enhance your soil's water-holding capacity.
It seems like there's a whole underground world we need to be nurturing.
Totally.
I'm also fascinated by the irrigation innovations the Eco blog mentions.
This is where technology steps in to help us become more water-wise.
Cool.
The EcoBlog dives into smart irrigation controllers.
Okay.
These devices act like mini meteorologists,
What?
monitoring weather patterns
Oh, cool.
and automatically adjusting your watering schedule.
So no more second guessing whether you watered enough.
Exactly. They're even programmed to water during optimal times,
Okay.
like early morning or late evening, to minimize water loss through evaporation.
Wow.
Talk about working smarter, not harder.
That's incredible. It seems like choosing the right plants is also a key element of water-wise gardening.
Yes?
The Eco blog seems to suggest it goes beyond just aesthetics.
Absolutely. Selecting plants that are well suited to your climate
Right?
and require less water is fundamental.
Okay.
The eco-blog highlights the importance of researching your local plant hardiness zone
Uh-huh.
to ensure you're choosing varieties that will thrive in your area.
I've heard of those zones,
Okay.
but honestly, I'm a little fuzzy in what they actually mean.
They're incredibly useful. Essentially, plant hardiness zones are geographically defined areas
Yeah.
based on the average coldest winter temperatures.
Okay.
So by knowing your zone,
Right.
you can select plants that are hardy enough to survive the winter in your region.
Ah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So a cactus probably wouldn't fare too well in my Zone 5 garden.
Probably not. But the eco-blog gives some amazing examples of drought-tolerant plants
Oh, good.
that thrive in full sun gardens like yours.
Okay.
Things like sedum, echinacea, and rudbeckia.
Ooh, those are all beautiful choices. Already envisioning them in my garden.
Right.
The eco-blog also mentions grouping plants with similar water needs.
Yes.
Isn't that what we were calling hydrozoning earlier?
You got it. It's a strategy that keeps coming up because
Ah.
it's so effective.
Right.
This way, your thirsty plants can quench their thirst
Uh-huh.
without drowning their more drought-tolerant neighbors.
That's all about creating a harmonious balance.
Precisely.
Mm.
Now, remember that tip from the Old Farmer's Almanac about planting bush varieties close together to reduce water loss?
Oh, yeah. That was a fascinating tip.
Yeah.
How does that work exactly?
It's all about creating a microclimate.
Okay.
The eco-blog explains how planting close together helps trap moisture and humidity,
Okay.
essentially forming a mini oasis for your plants.
Interesting.
Plus, it can create a really lush, visually appealing look.
I'm all about that. And speaking of appealing, the eco-blog also raves about the beauty of incorporating succulents and native plants into the garden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Succulents are nature's water storage experts.
Really?
The eco-blog details how their thick leaves are designed to hold on to moisture,
Interesting.
making them perfect for dry conditions.
They add such a unique texture to a garden.
Right.
And I've always loved native plants.
They're naturally adapted to your region's climate and soil conditions.
Right.
The eco-blog highlights how this means they require less water and often less maintenance. Plus, they provide crucial habitat and food sources for local wildlife.
I love that it's a win for both the environment and the ecosystem. So it's clear that choosing the right plants is a crucial step in building a water-wise garden.
Absolutely. Now let's shift our attention back to the soil. It's time to get our hands dirty.
I'm all about that. We talked about the importance of compost earlier,
Yeah.
but the eco-blog really goes in depth about all the benefits of incorporating organic matter into our soil.
It's not just about water retention,
Right.
although that's a huge plus. Organic matter is like a slow-release fertilizer, providing essential nutrients as it decomposes. The eco-blog also explains how it enhances soil structure,
Yeah.
creating those all-important air pockets for healthy root development.
It's like creating a vibrant, living ecosystem beneath the surface.
Exactly. The eco-blog also mentions how organic matter encourages beneficial organisms like earthworms, which further aerate the soil and contribute to its health.
I'm starting to see how everything is interconnected in a garden.
Absolutely. Speaking of interconnectedness,
Okay.
the eco-blog also discusses the importance of aeration
Wait,
for creating a thriving water-wise garden.
I've heard the term,
Yeah.
but I'm not entirely sure what aeration entails. Is it just poking holes in the soil?
Essentially, yes. The eco-blog explains how aeration improves oxygen flow to plant roots,
Oh,
which is vital for their ability to absorb water efficiently.
okay.
You can use simple tools like a garden fork or a specialized aerator to create these air pockets.
Got it. So aerating helps those roots breathe easier,
Yeah.
leading to healthier, more drought-tolerant plants.
Precisely. Now let's revisit our friend mulch.
Okay.
We touched on its water-saving superpowers,
Right.
but the eco-blog explores different types and their ideal uses.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Are there times when we'd want to use something other than the organic mulches we talked about earlier?
Absolutely. The eco-blog mentions that while organic mulches are fantastic for garden beds, inorganic options like gravel can be a great choice for low-maintenance areas like pathways or driveways.
Oh, okay.
They don't decompose as quickly, so they require less frequent replenishing.
That makes sense. The eco-blog also mentions this technique of layering mulch for optimal effectiveness.
Yes.
I'd love to hear more about that.
It's a great way to create a super-powered mulch barrier.
Okay.
The eco-blog suggests starting with a coarse material at the base,
Uh-huh.
like straw or bark chips for breathability,
Okay.
and then topping it with a finer, more nutrient-rich layer,
Right.
like compost or shredded leaves.
It's like creating a multi-layered defense system for your soil.
Exactly. And the eco-blog reminds us that mulch care is a year-round endeavor.
Okay.
They provide tips for adjusting your approach based on the season,
Okay.
like refreshing the mulch in spring and fall,
Yeah.
and layering thicker in summer to combat the heat.
So mulch is a dynamic element in the garden. I like that.
It is.
Now let's shift gears and talk about watering techniques. I'm ready to learn how to keep my garden hydrated without wasting precious water.
This is where things get really dialed in. The eco-blog emphasizes the importance of timing and frequency when it comes to watering.
So there's a strategy involved.
Absolutely. The eco-blog highlights how watering in the early morning or late evening,
Okay.
when temperatures are cooler, can significantly reduce evaporation rates.
Makes sense.
They also recommend a deep, infrequent watering approach.
Deep and infrequent.
Yes.
Why is that preferable?
Deep watering encourages your plants to develop strong, extensive root systems,
No.
making them more resilient to drought. The eco-blog emphasizes how overwatering can actually be just as harmful as underwatering.
Wow.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot.
It's about quality over quantity then.
Exactly. Now, the eco-blog also delves into some really handy tools that can help make your watering more efficient.
Okay, tell me more about these tools. I'm all about making every drop count.
Soaker hoses and drip irrigation systems are like water-wise ninjas. The eco-blog explains how they deliver water directly to the root zone,
Okay.
minimizing waste and reducing the risk of diseases
Right.
that can thrive on damp foliage.
That's so clever. What about using a watering can? Is there a right way to even do that?
The eco-blog suggests opting for watering cans with free flow spouts
Okay.
for optimal water delivery. They're still incredibly useful for targeted watering of individual plants or seedlings.
Got it. Now, we talked about underwatering earlier.
Right.
But how do we know if we're overwatering our plants? What are the telltale signs?
Overwatering can be sneaky, but the eco-blog points out a few key indicators.
Okay.
Yellowing leaves, wilting, and stunted growth are all red flags.
So it's not always a case of more water is better.
Definitely not. Too much water can suffocate plant roots
Oh, wow.
and create an environment ripe for disease.
Yeah.
The eco-blog recommends checking your soil moisture regularly.
Right.
You can use your finger
Oh.
or invest in a moisture sensor for more precise readings.
This is all great advice. It seems like the eco-blog also champions rainwater harvesting.
Yes.
It sounds incredibly eco-friendly,
Yeah.
but also maybe a bit intimidating to set up.
It's simpler than you might think. The eco-blog breaks down how to set up a rain barrel system.
Okay.
Essentially, you're collecting rainwater from your roof
Right.
and storing it for later use in your garden.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Well,
Walk me through the basic setup.
the eco-blog recommends placing your rain barrel near a downspout
Okay.
to capture the runoff from your roof. You'll want to position it on a platform
Okay.
to increase the flow rate
Okay.
and make it easier to access the water.
Makes sense. So how do you actually connect the barrel to the downspout?
You can get a diverter kit that easily redirects the water from your downspout into the barrel.
Okay.
The eco-blog also mentions that most rain barrels come with an overflow valve to handle excess water.
That's good to know. So once you have a barrel full of rainwater, how do you actually use it in your garden?
You can attach a hose to the spigot at the bottom of the barrel.
And water your plants as needed.
It sounds so simple and satisfying.
It is. And the eco-blog highlights how you can take it a step further
Okay.
by integrating your rain barrel with your irrigation system.
Wow, now we're getting high-tech. Tell me more about that.
It's a fantastic way to automate your watering and maximize your rainwater use. The eco-blog outlines how you can connect your rain barrel to your irrigation system using a simple hose connection or a more sophisticated system with a pump and filter.
That's incredible. Now, what about maximizing rainwater collection during those heavy downpours? Wouldn't one barrel fill up quickly?
That's a great point. The eco-blog suggests connecting multiple barrels to increase your storage capacity. They also recommend cleaning your gutters regularly to ensure water flows freely into your barrel, and using a first flush diverter to remove any initial runoff that might contain debris.
Those are great tips. It seems like rainwater harvesting is a no-brainer for any eco-conscious gardener. Absolutely. It's a sustainable practice that reduces our reliance on municipal water sources and makes the most of nature's bounty. Speaking of sustainable practices,
Okay.
the eco-blog also dedicates a good chunk of their posts
Yeah.
to exploring drip irrigation systems.
I've heard a lot about drip irrigation, but I've always been a little intimidated by the idea of setting up a whole system. Is it complicated?
It's much easier than you might think. The eco-blog breaks down the process into simple steps,
Okay.
starting with identifying your water source
Right.
and making sure it has a suitable pressure regulator.
Okay, what happens next?
Next, you'll want to plan out your garden area
Okay.
and determine where the mainline tubing for your drip system will run.
So it's kind of like designing a miniature plumbing system for your plants.
Exactly. Then comes the fun part.
Okay.
Selecting the right emitters and drippers for your plants.
Emitters and drippers. What are those exactly?
They're small devices that control the water flow to each plant.
Oh, okay.
The eco-blog explains how they come in various flow rates to match the needs of different plants.
So it's all about customization.
Precisely. Once you've chosen your emitters and drippers,
Right.
you'll lay out the tubing, cut it to size, connect the fittings,
Right.
and flush the system to remove any debris. The eco-blog also stresses the importance of checking for leaks to avoid any water waste.
It sounds like a really satisfying project.
It is.
And the eco-blog mentions how customizable these systems are.
Right.
Can you really tailor them to each plant's individual needs?
Absolutely. You can adjust the drip rate, use different types of emitters,
Okay.
and even create hydrozones to group plants with similar water requirements.
Wow. So you're essentially micromanaging your garden's hydration.
Exactly. And the eco-blog highlights how this level of control leads to significant water conservation.
I can see why.
Right.
Now, before we move on,
Yeah.
can we circle back to the concept of hydrozoning?
Absolutely.
I really want to make sure I understand this technique,
Yeah.
as it seems to be a recurring theme in water-wise gardening.
You're absolutely right. Hydrozoning is a foundational principle that keeps popping up.
Right.
It's all about understanding that not all plants have the same thirst.
Okay, so remind me how it actually works in a garden setting.
The eco-blog explains that the first step is to observe your garden and identify areas that receive varying amounts of sunlight. You'll have sunny spots, shady spots, and everything in between.
Yeah.
Then with each of these areas, you
Okay.
group together plants with similar water needs.
So, for example, I might put my moisture-loving ferns together in a shadier spot where they won't dry out as quickly.
Exactly. And you might place your drought-tolerant herbs in a sun-drenched spot.
So it's like creating microclimates that cater to specific water needs.
Precisely. This way, you can water each zone according to its unique requirements.
Hmm.
The eco-blog emphasizes how this leads to less water waste and happier, healthier plants.
It's such a smart approach. The eco-blog also discusses the concept of companion planting as a way to boost efficiency.
Yeah.
I've heard of companion planting, but I'm not sure how it relates to water conservation.
It's a fascinating technique. Companion planting involves strategically pairing plants that benefit each other in various ways. The eco-blog explains how some plant combinations can actually reduce overall water needs.
Okay, how does that work?
For example, planting taller plants
Okay.
that provide shade for their thirstier neighbors can help reduce evaporation.
Oh, interesting.
Or pairing plants that repel pests can help keep those water-hungry critters at bay.
So it's about creating a symbiotic relationship between plants. Do you have any favorite companion planting combinations?
The eco-blog mentions planting tomatoes with basil.
Oh,
The basil helps repel tomato hornworms,
okay.
while the tomatoes provide shade for the basil.
That's brilliant. I love the idea of creating these little plant communities that support each other.
Me too. And speaking of support,
Yeah.
the eco-blog also reminds us to adjust our garden layouts to account for seasonal changes.
So our gardens are not static. We need to be thinking about how water needs change throughout the year.
Exactly. The eco-blog highlights how cooler months might require less frequent watering,
Right.
while the scorching summer heat might demand more.
So we're constantly adapting and fine-tuning our approach.
Precisely. The eco-blog even suggests utilizing the seasonal adjust feature on irrigation controllers to modify watering times based on weather conditions.
That's a great tip. I'm starting to realize that water-wise gardening requires us to be really in tune with our gardens and the natural world around us.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on to the final section of our deep dive,
Okay.
let's touch on the importance of routine maintenance.
Okay.
The eco-blog stresses that this is crucial for ensuring all our water-wise efforts are paying off.
So we can't just set it and forget it.
Not if we want to be truly water-wise.
Right.
The eco-blog advises regularly checking your irrigation system for leaks,
Okay.
as even a small drip can waste a surprising amount of water over time.
What should we be looking for during these checks?
The eco-blog recommends looking for telltale signs.
Okay.
like wet spots in unexpected areas, or unusually lush growth that might indicate a leaky hose.
So a keen eye for observation is essential.
Absolutely. And don't forget to inspect hoses, connectors, and valves for any signs of wear and tear.
Got it. Are there any tools or techniques that can help us monitor our soil's moisture levels more effectively?
Absolutely. Soil moisture meters are a game changer.
Okay.
The Eco blog explains how they provide a more accurate reading
Okay.
of how much moisture is actually present in your soil,
Right.
which can help you avoid both overwatering and underwatering.
I imagine they're especially helpful for those of us who tend to be heavy-handed with the watering can.
Yeah,
Are there different types of moisture meters?
there are. The Eco blog mentions simple analog probes
Okay.
and more sophisticated digital sensors. It's all about finding the tool that best suits your needs and budget.
That's really helpful. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
are there any final thoughts from the Ego blog
Yeah.
that you think are particularly important?
One thing that really resonated with me is the EcoBlog's emphasis on constantly adapting our watering practices based on the season and the needs of our individual gardens. They suggest utilizing features like seasonal adjust on irrigation controllers to fine-tune your watering schedule.
That's a great point. We can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach to watering.
Exactly. And they remind us that even small adjustments,
Yeah.
like laying hoses directly near plants during periods of high need, can make a significant difference in our water usage.
That's such a simple yet effective tip. It seems like the Eco blog encourages us to view our gardens as dynamic, evolving ecosystems.
Absolutely. It's a constant process of observation, learning, and adapting to create a thriving garden that's in harmony with nature. You know, it's fascinating how nature provides like the best blueprints for water efficiency.
Absolutely. It's like she's been perfecting these strategies for millennia. And we can learn so much from observing how plants thrive
Right.
in diverse environments.
Precisely. The EcoBlog delves into some amazing plant adaptations
Yeah.
that demonstrate the power of natural water conservation.
Okay, like what? I'm ready to be amazed by nature's ingenuity.
For instance, some plants have developed waxy coatings on their leaves
Mm-hmm.
to minimize water loss through transpiration.
Interesting.
That's like they have their own built-in rain gear.
That's incredible. It's like nature's way of saying no sweat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And other plants have evolved incredibly deep root systems
Yeah.
that allow them to tap into water sources far below the surface.
It's like they have their own personal wells.
Yeah.
So smart.
Nature is full of these brilliant solutions. The Eco blog even mentions plants like bromeliads
Okay.
that have adapted to catch and store rainwater in their leaves,
Wow.
creating their own little reservoirs.
Wow, I never knew that. It seems like there's so much we can learn from observing these natural strategies
Yeah,
and applying them to our own gardens.
absolutely. Now, speaking of adapting strategies,
Okay.
the Eco blog also dives into the topic of lawn care,
Right.
which can be a major water guzzler if we're not careful.
Oh, yeah, the lawn. I love having a green space.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely trying to be more mindful of water usage.
Sure.
Are there ways to have a healthy lawn without turning on the sprinklers every day?
Absolutely. The Eco blog offers some fantastic tips for creating a more water-wise lawn.
Okay.
It all starts with choosing the right type of grass for
Okay.
your climate.
So ditching the traditional Kentucky bluegrass. What are some good alternatives?
The Eco blog suggests exploring drought-tolerant grass varieties
Okay.
that require less frequent watering.
Okay.
They might not be as lush and vibrant green as their
Mhm.
thirsty counterparts,
Right.
but they can still create a beautiful and functional lawn.
I'm all for a little less green if it means conserving water.
Me too.
What are some other lawn care practices the Eco blog recommends?
They highlight the importance of mowing high.
Oh.
Taller grass blades shade the soil, reducing evaporation and promoting deeper root growth.
So embracing a slightly shaggier lawn is actually a good thing.
Exactly. It's all about shifting our perspective, right?
On what a healthy lawn looks like.
I like that.
And of course, the Eco blog emphasizes the importance of watering deeply but infrequently,
Right.
just like we talked about with garden beds.
So those deep roots are beneficial for lawns too. Makes sense.
Absolutely. And don't forget about utilizing a rain sensor
Right.
on your sprinkler system to prevent watering when nature has already taken care of it.
That's such a simple yet effective way to avoid unnecessary watering. I love it. Now, shifting gears a bit,
Okay.
the Eco blog also touches on container gardening.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of container gardening myself,
Me too.
but I often struggle with keeping those pots adequately watered.
Yeah.
They seem to dry out so quickly.
Container gardening does present its own unique challenges when it comes to water conservation.
Yeah.
The Inco blog breaks down why container plants tend to dry out faster.
Okay.
Their roots are confined to a smaller space, and they're more exposed to the elements.
That makes sense. So what are some strategies for keeping our container plants happy and hydrated?
Without constantly reaching for the watering can.
The eco-blog stresses the importance of choosing a well-draining potting mix
Okay.
that also has good water retention.
Okay.
They suggest looking for mixes that contain ingredients
Yeah.
like peat moss or coconut coir,
Okay.
which act like sponges,
Right.
holding on to moisture.
So it's all about the foundation.
Yes.
Giving those roots the right environment to thrive.
Exactly.
Are there certain types of containers that are better for water conservation?
Absolutely. The eco-blog recommends selecting appropriately sized containers.
Yeah.
Cramming plants into tiny pots
Right.
will restrict their root growth and make them more susceptible to drying out.
So bigger is better when it comes to container.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
The eco-blog also mentions the brilliance of self-watering containers.
Oh, yeah. Those are so cool. I've always been curious about them. How do they actually work?
They have a built-in reservoir at the bottom that holds water.
Oh.
The plant's roots can then access the water as needed,
Oh, wow.
essentially watering themselves.
That's amazing. It sounds like a dream come true for a forgetful gardener like myself.
They're definitely a game changer. And just like with garden beds,
Yeah.
the eco-blog reminds us that a layer of mulch on top of the potting mix can work wonders for retaining moisture in containers.
It seems like mulch is the superhero of the gardening world. It solves so many problems.
It truly is a versatile and valuable tool. Now, speaking of valuable elements in the garden,
Okay.
let's talk about attracting wildlife.
Okay.
The eco-blog highlights how creating a wildlife-friendly garden can actually enhance our water conservation efforts.
Okay, that sounds counterintuitive.
Ah.
How does attracting more creatures to the garden help us save water?
It's all about creating a balanced ecosystem. The eco-blog explains that when we invite beneficial insects, birds, and other wildlife into our gardens,
Yeah.
we're encouraging natural pest control.
So the good guys take care of the bad guys,
Right.
and we don't have to resort to using as many pesticides.
Exactly. Pesticides can harm beneficial insects and disrupt the natural balance of the ecosystem.
Right.
The eco-blog stresses that by attracting wildlife, we're
Yeah.
essentially enlisting an army of natural pest control agents.
That's amazing. I love the idea of my garden becoming a haven for wildlife.
Me too.
What are some practical ways to create a more wildlife-friendly space?
The eco-blog suggests providing a variety of food sources,
Okay.
like bird feeders and butterfly gardens, as well as water sources like bird baths or small ponds.
Those are great ideas, especially during dry spells.
Yeah,
Those water sources can be a lifesaver for our feathered and furry friends.
absolutely. And don't forget about providing shelter. The eco-blog recommends things like nesting boxes for birds and brush piles for small mammals.
It's all about creating a welcoming habitat.
Exactly. By mimicking elements of a natural ecosystem, we're creating a more balanced and resilient garden.
I love that. Now, before we move on,
Yeah.
I want to revisit the concept of hydrozoning. It seems like such a fundamental aspect of water-wise gardening. That I want to make sure I fully grasp it. Can we break it down one more time?
Absolutely. I'm happy to dive back into hydrozoning.
Okay.
It really is a key to efficient watering.
Yeah.
The eco-blog emphasizes that the first step is to observe your garden and identify areas that receive varying amounts of sunlight throughout the day.
So sunny spots, shady spots, and everything in between.
Exactly. And once you've mapped out those areas,
Yeah.
you group plants with similar water needs within each zone.
So all my sun-loving, drought-tolerant herbs
Right.
might get clustered together,
Yeah.
while my moisture-loving hostas
Oh.
might be grouped in a shadier spot.
You got it. By organizing your garden this way, you can tailor your watering to each zone's specific needs, ensuring that all your plants receive the right amount of moisture.
It makes so much sense when you explain it like that.
Yeah.
It really simplifies watering and takes the guesswork out of it.
Exactly. Now, while we're on the topic of foundations,
Okay.
let's delve back into the world of soil health. We talked about the benefits of organic matter,
Right.
but I'd love to explore this further. The eco-blog really emphasizes how vital healthy soil is for water conservation.
Absolutely. Healthy soil seems to be at the heart of it all.
Yeah.
But how do we go beyond just adding compost? What else can we do to create a soil structure that truly supports a water-wise garden?
The eco-blog is all about minimizing soil disturbance.
Okay.
Traditional tilling practices can actually disrupt the soil structure and expose those beneficial microbes we talked about earlier to harsh elements.
So we're putting down the tiller. What's the alternative?
The eco-blog advocates for no-till gardening methods.
Oh,
This involves layering organic matter on top of the soil
okay.
rather than digging it in.
So we're essentially building up the soil from above.
Exactly. This
Yeah.
helps preserve those crucial microorganisms
Right.
and encourages a thriving underground ecosystem.
Yeah.
The eco-blog explains how this, in turn, improves water infiltration and retention.
It's a much gentler, more sustainable approach.
It is.
The eco-blog also mentions something about soil pH.
Yes.
Is that something we need to be concerned about?
It can definitely play a role. The eco-blog explains how pH refers to the acidity or alkalinity of the soil,
Okay.
and different plants have different preferences.
So some plants are acid lovers, while others prefer a more alkaline environment.
Precisely. And if the soil pH is too far out of balance,
Okay.
it can affect the plant's ability to absorb nutrients and water efficiently.
So how do we know if our soil pH is out of whack?
You can easily test your soil pH using a simple kit.
Yeah.
You can find at most garden centers. The eco-blog outlines how to interpret the results and how to amend your soil if necessary.
What kind of amendments are we talking about?
The eco-blog mentions adding lime to raise the pH of acidic soil, or sulfur, to lower the pH of alkaline soil.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot for your plants.
Exactly. Now, speaking of finding resources,
Okay.
the eco-blog dives into the fascinating world of gray water, a resource that often goes to waste.
Gray water. I've heard the term, but I'm not entirely sure what it means. Is it just dirty water?
It's not quite dirty,
Okay.
but it's not fresh, drinkable water either.
Okay.
The eco-blog defines gray water as the water that's been used for household purposes like laundry or dishwashing.
Ah, okay. So is it safe to use this water on our gardens?
With a little bit of care and attention.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The eco-blog emphasizes that there are definitely some things to keep in mind when utilizing gray water. First and foremost,
Okay.
they recommend checking your local regulations,
Right.
as there might be rules regarding its use.
That makes sense. We don't want to unknowingly break any rules.
Yeah.
What other precautions should we take?
The eco-blog stresses the importance of using gray water immediately
Okay.
and not storing it for extended periods.
Why is that?
Stored gray water can begin to decompose and develop unpleasant odors.
Oh.
It's best to use it fresh.
Okay.
They also advise against using gray water on edible plants,
Okay.
as there's a slight risk of contamination.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
So sticking to ornamentals is the safest bet.
Yes.
What other gray water wisdom does the eco-blog impart?
They recommend investing in a gray water system that filters out solids so you're not introducing soap or food particles into your garden soil.
It sounds like using gray water responsibly takes a bit of extra effort, but the potential water savings are significant.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic way to reduce our reliance on fresh water and make the most of this often overlooked resource. Speaking of utilizing natural resources,
Okay.
let's circle back to rainwater harvesting.
I love the idea of harnessing the power of rain. We talked about setting up a rain barrel earlier.
Yeah,
But are there other ways to collect rainwater?
you bet. The eco-blog mentions cisterns,
Okay.
which are larger, more permanent structures, often made of concrete or metal.
Okay.
They can hold significantly more water than a typical rain barrel.
So a cistern would be a good option for someone who wants to collect a serious amount of rainwater.
Exactly. The eco-blog even describes systems that can be integrated into your home's plumbing to utilize rainwater for things like flushing toilets.
Wow, that's impressive. But even on a smaller scale,
Right.
a simple rain barrel can make a big difference, right?
Absolutely. And the eco-blog is full of tips for maximizing rainwater collection.
Okay.
They reiterate the importance of keeping those gutters clean, as well as utilizing a first flush diverter to remove any initial runoff that may contain debris.
Good reminders. Are there any other creative ways to make the most of rainwater?
The eco-blog suggests directing the overflow from your rain barrels to water trees or shrubs,
Oh.
ensuring that no drop goes to waste.
Love it. I'm also curious about different watering techniques. Are there methods that are particularly effective for water-wise gardening?
The eco-blog sings the praises of soaker hoses,
Okay.
which we touched on earlier.
Right.
They slowly release water directly to the root zone, minimizing evaporation and preventing water from being wasted on leaves or surrounding soil.
They sound like the perfect slow and steady approach to watering.
Exactly. The eco-blog also provides a great overview of drip irrigation systems
Right.
and how they can be customized to meet the specific needs of different plants.
Drip irrigation seems like the ultimate in personalized plant care.
It is. And it's incredibly water-wise, especially when combined with a timer and a rain sensor. The eco-blog also highlights the importance of applying mulch generously, which, as we've discussed, helps to retain moisture and suppress weeds.
It seems like mulch is the gift that keeps on giving in the garden.
It truly is. Now, speaking of gifts, the eco-blog introduces us to the concept of xeriscaping,
Okay.
which is essentially designing landscapes that require minimal water.
I've heard the term, but always thought it was just about cacti and rocks.
It's much more nuanced than that.
Okay.
The eco-blog explains how xeriscaping involves selecting drought-tolerant plants,
Okay.
grouping them based on water needs,
Okay.
and utilizing mulch to create a thriving, water-wise landscape.
So it's about working with nature
Right.
to create beautiful, low-maintenance gardens that thrive in drier conditions.
Right.
What are some key principles of xeriscaping that the eco-blog highlights?
They emphasize the importance of minimizing turf areas,
Okay.
as lawns are often the biggest water guzzlers in a landscape. They also suggest incorporating hardscaping features,
Okay.
like patios or walkways, to reduce the overall area that needs irrigation.
That's a great way to create a more functional and visually appealing outdoor space while also conserving water. Now, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to touch on the importance of actively monitoring our gardens.
Yeah,
The eco-blog stresses that this is an ongoing process.
absolutely. The eco-blog reminds us that we can't just set up our water-wise systems and then walk away.
Right.
We need to be constantly observing our gardens,
Yeah.
looking for signs of stress that might indicate a need for adjustments.
Yeah, we need to become garden detectives.
Yes,
Always on the lookout for clues.
exactly. Wilting leaves, for example, are often a sign of underwatering. On the other hand, yellowing leaves or stunted growth can be indicators of overwatering.
It seems like the soil itself can tell us a lot, too.
Absolutely. The eco-blog reminds us that we can use a simple finger test to check the soil moisture,
Right.
or invest in a moisture meter for more precise readings.
Those are great tips. It seems like the key is to err on the side of underwatering rather than overwatering.
Precisely. It's much easier for a plant to recover from being a bit dry than from being waterlogged.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the eco-blog,
Yeah.
are there any final thoughts or reflections you'd like to share?
One thing that continues to resonate with me is the eco-blog's emphasis on the interconnectedness of our gardens with the larger world. When we make choices that conserve water in our gardens, we're contributing to a healthier planet as a whole.
It's a beautiful ripple effect. Our individual actions in the garden can truly have a global impact.
Absolutely. By embracing water-wise gardening techniques,
Yeah.
we're not only helping our plants thrive, we're also playing a role in protecting this precious resource for future generations.
This deep dive has been so inspiring. I feel like I've learned so much,
Good.
not just about gardening, but about my connection to the natural world.
It's been a pleasure sharing this exploration with you. Remember, every drop counts. By making mindful choices in our gardens,
Yeah.
we can create spaces that are both beautiful and sustainable.
Well said.
Mm.
I'm ready to go forth and create a thriving, water-wise oasis.
Happy gardening.
It's been such an insightful journey, exploring the eco-blog and all these amazing water-wise gardening techniques.
It has.
But even with the best intentions, I imagine there can still be, challenges along the way.
You're absolutely right. The eco-blog acknowledges that even the most seasoned water-wise gardeners can encounter bumps in the road.
Yeah.
They dedicate a whole section to troubleshooting common challenges.
Okay, I'm ready to face those challenges head on. What are some of the issues that tend to trip people up?
One common hurdle the eco-blog addresses is dealing with pests and diseases in a water-wise garden.
Yeah.
It can be tricky because we're trying to minimize or eliminate the use of harsh chemical pesticides.
Right, so how do we protect our precious plants without resorting to those harmful chemicals?
The eco-blog emphasizes the importance of building a healthy and balanced ecosystem.
Right.
This means inviting beneficial insects like ladybugs and lacewings, who are natural predators of many common garden pests.
So we're enlisting the help of nature's own pest control squad. How do we attract these beneficial insects to our gardens?
The eco-blog suggests planting a diverse array of flowering plants that provide both food and habitat for these helpful creatures.
It's like creating a welcome buffet for the beneficial bugs.
Exactly. And another key strategy the eco-blog highlights is choosing disease-resistant plant varieties whenever possible.
So doing a little research beforehand Can save a lot of headaches later on.
Yeah.
Are there any other preventative measures we can take?
The eco-blog stresses the importance of good garden sanitation.
Okay.
This means removing any diseased or infested plant material promptly to prevent the problem from spreading.
That makes perfect sense. Prevention is always the best medicine. But what if we find ourselves battling a particularly stubborn pest or disease? What are our options?
The eco-blog recommends exploring organic pest control methods as a first line of defense. They mention things like insecticidal soap or neem oil, which can be effective against many common pests while being gentler on the environment than synthetic pesticides.
Those are great options. I'm always looking for natural solutions. Now, another challenge that I've personally struggled with is compacted soil.
Okay.
It seems like no matter how much I water, it just doesn't penetrate.
Compacted soil is a common problem, and it can be a real obstacle to creating a thriving, water-wise garden. The eco-blog explains how compacted soil prevents water from reaching plant roots effectively.
It's like trying to water a brick.
Yeah.
Are there ways to remedy this situation?
Absolutely. The eco-blog reminds us that adding organic matter is one of the best ways to improve soil structure over time.
So back to the compost and mulch. I'm seeing a recurring theme here.
Exactly. Those materials help to break up the soil and create air pockets that allow for better water penetration. For severely compacted areas like walkways or patios, the eco-blog recommends aeration techniques to loosen the soil.
We talked about aeration earlier using a garden fork or a special tool, right?
Precisely. It's a great way to give the soil a much-needed breath of fresh air and improve its ability to absorb water.
Now, I imagine another common challenge for people transitioning to water-wise gardening is knowing when and how much to water.
Yeah,
It's a delicate balance.
you're absolutely right. It's a skill that takes practice and observation. The eco-blog encourages us to pay close attention to the signs our plants are giving us.
So like a detective looking for clues.
Exactly. Wilting leaves, for example, are often a sign of underwatering. On the other hand, yellowing leaves or stunted growth can be indicators of overwatering.
It seems like the soil itself can tell us a lot too.
Absolutely. The eco-blog reminds us that we can use a simple finger test to check the soil moisture or invest in a moisture meter for more precise readings.
Those are great tips. It seems like the key is to err on the side of underwatering rather than overwatering.
Precisely. It's much easier for a plant to recover from being a bit dry than from being waterlogged.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the eco-blog,
Yeah.
are there any final thoughts or reflections you'd like to share?
One thing that continues to resonate with me is the eco-blog's emphasis on the interconnectedness of our gardens with the larger world.
Right.
When we make choices that conserve water in our gardens, we're contributing to a healthier planet as a whole.
It's a beautiful ripple effect.
Yeah.
Our individual actions in the garden can truly have a global impact.
Absolutely. By embracing water-wise gardening techniques, we're not only helping our plants thrive, we're also playing a role in protecting this precious resource for future generations.
This deep dive has been so inspiring. I feel like I've learned so much, not just about gardening, but about my connection to the natural world.
Me too. It's been a pleasure sharing this exploration with you. Remember, every drop counts. By making mindful choices in our gardens, we can create spaces that are both beautiful and sustainable.
Will said. I'm ready to go forth and create a thriving water-wise oasis. This is the way the green grows.
Happy gardening.